Hello, folks. How are you? It's good to see you. It's Friday afternoon. History Chap live, and already loads of you on the call. Well, he says loads. Well, we've got 12 of you. That's good enough to start off with, isn't it? And no doubt some other folk will be joining us as we go along. So, in order, we've got Johan. Nice to see you, mate, and thank you very much for joining the membership channel as well. Very kind of you. Thank you very much. And so you're in on you, the first person to be acknowledged here. Leslie, you are a member anyway, so it's good to see you from over in the USA. Vince, first a Brit who comments today from cloudy West Sussex. Yeah, the weather's pretty crap up here in Worcester as well. Sarah Jane, from your secret location, somewhere near Bletchley Park, I would think. Harry Shriver, another one of my American supporters. Lovely to have you here as well, Harry. Yeah. I'm just reading your comment there, Harry. Thank you. We're all on real weather check. This is like really British, isn't it? QA Library, nice to see you down in Portsmouth in Hampshire. John Sadler, good to see you as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Gaslight Studio rebooted. Nice to see you as well. And we've got everyone coming in. Cara Hughes, 500 lines for being late. There's no late on a live show. You know, I'm just sort of. It's like turning up at a pub or something. You know, you just rock up and leave when you want as well. There's really nothing more. Mick Morden, good to see you as well. Mech 1429, nice to have you on board as well. So yeah, I have to say, been a busy week. Felt a bit on fire actually. Good, isn't it? I don't know if it's something in the water, but funny enough, I have actually been doing this fasting thing this week where you only eat you basically don't eat for 16 hours and then eat all your meals in an 8-hour period. And I have to say, I'm highly skeptical. I've actually been enjoying it. Maybe that's what's given me the energy, but it's been a busy week. Golly, I've got 2 videos out this week. How about that? We've got the Battle of Ramillies, and we also had Blackadder. Not Edmund Blackadder, but John Blackadder, who fought actually with or alongside for Marlborough in his battles, including Ramillies and Blenheim as well, where he was wounded. And we will come on, well, in these stories, one of the battles he's also at is Malplaquet, which will come on later as well. So hopefully you've had a chance to watch those. They're doing quite well actually, so I'm pleased with those. So I've had those. I've delivered an online talk for a group that I speak to called Restless. It's a retirement group, retired people over 55s. It's aimed at actually, but I'm doing a series on the Wars of the Roses, and this week I did a live talk for them on part 3 of my talk, all about the House of York triumphant, sort of how they resurrected after Richard of York had been killed at Wakefield, how his young son, Edward, Earl of March, turns the fortunes of the House of York round and ultimately comes up trumps at the Battle of Tewkesbury. So that was quite good. And maybe I'll do something like that here as well at some stage. Just got to appreciate that you guys love your British history. Out there, the wider History Chap community, they quite like all the sort of Victorian stuff, bit of World War I, World War II, and they seem to be enjoying the Duke of Marlborough. So maybe going back to the Wars of the Roses is a step too far at the moment, which again raises the great line about, do I have a second channel looking more into the history inside the British Isles rather than just pure foreign expeditions from military? Don't know. What else? I did a live show for my patrons on Monday, which is great, and I've also just compiled my weekly newsletter as well for my 1,500 people who are on my newsletter. So yeah, it's been a busy week indeed. I managed to get some cooking, some exercise in there as well. So yeah, cool stuff. Anyway, let's see who else is. Blimey, loads of focus suddenly on the call here. So we've got Neil Morrison. Good to see you up in Scotland. His dad James 4876. From Rotterdam. Hey, over in the Netherlands. Good to see you. Where else we got? I'm just gonna shout out the people who are joining at the minute. Bottoman from Bavaria, who's always seemed to be on the wrong side. I'm assuming you're talking about the wrong side in the wars that Marlborough was fighting there. Alex Sexton, nice to see you as well. And you're enjoying the videos on the War of Spanish Succession. Sydney, you're in, Alex. I'm glad you're enjoying those. I was going to ask some questions about that in a while, actually, to all of you, not just to you, Alex. David Kelsey. Why do I think so many people love the Zulu Wars? I don't know. And actually, why don't we come on to that later? Because this week is a significant week in the Anglo-Zulu Wars, or at least, sorry, this week in history was a significant week in the Anglo-Zulu Wars. So, David, I'll hold your I'll hold that question, and we'll throw it out to the wider audience. Anyone who wants to at the minute, by all means, answer David's question. Why are people so fascinated by the Anglo-Zulu War? Sarah Jane, you got some views on dieting and my fasting, lamenting, although I was whining earlier in the week. I'm feeling quite good about it now. I'm a bit like a reformed smoker. You know, I'll be telling you all how brilliant fasting is. Charlie Manson, good to see you as well, from Yorkshire. Out bush again. Queensland, Australia. Blimey, it must be a bit late for you guys over there, isn't it, in Australia? I don't know what time it is over there, but hey, and someone else over in, well, not in Australia, but that sort of area of time, Bangkok. Thank you very much, Mac. Colin Edwards, hello. Expat 66 in -9 in Helsinki. Ouch. Can you imagine how much the Brits would moan if we had a -9 day? Another greetings from Germany, from Zakaria. Thank you very much. Oh, Harry, it's how you lost 44 pounds in 1 year. What, this fasting thing? Blinking heck. I'm up for that, Harry. I'm up for that. Honorary Spock from Croydon. Nice to see you. Duncan Kilburn, also in London. Wow, we got a London contingent. Funny enough, I was doing some research back into last week about my family tree, doing some stuff just through that ancestry. And I was getting really excited with our Scottish roots. I was tracing my Scottish roots, and it ends up that the Scots in my family, the Scottish roots, they ended up in London. They'd moved. I mean, I knew they were in London by the time my grandfather married Florence McEwen. I didn't realise that actually it's my great-great-great-grandfather who was a genuine Scot. They all moved down to London in the 1840s, can you believe? Radio. I'm just looking here. Bailey Bell. Thank you very much. So much AI history videos on YouTube now. So you really found you pleased me. How do I feel about AI? I'll tell you what, Bailey Bell, I'll come back to that one in a minute, because what I want to do first is actually just cover off a few dates in British history this week, some of the events that happened in British history, and then we can open up. Otherwise, we can tell I'll be just chit-chatting away in the chat, which is quite cool. We've got Colorado. Hey, my second cousin lives in Colorado Springs. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, fine. Right, let me just... let me kick off with a few events that happened in British history this week, so that well, it could spur some research for you. Maybe ask me, come back and say, love to hear that one in more detail from the History Chap. By all means, throw that into the chat, won't you? Or you just, with these facts and figures, you can impress your friends and family and make everyone think that you are a real history buff. How about that? So, 18th of January, back on the Sunday, 18th of January, 1486, Henry VII, the first of the Tudor monarchs, married Elizabeth of York, and basically sort of underpins the Tudors' authority, right to the throne, credentials to the English throne, by marrying into the House of Plantagenet, not just into the House of Plantagenet, but the daughter of Edward IV of the Yorkists, who I just mentioned just now. Edward, Earl of March, who wins at the Battle of Tewkesbury in the Wars of the Roses, is crowned King Edward IV of England. And it's his daughter, Elizabeth of York, who marries Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor, who defeated Edward IV's brother, Richard III, at the Battle of Bosworth. So there we go. Anyway, that's enough of that one. I could be into the Wars of Roses all day for you. So 18th of January, 1806. Don't know if we've got any of our South Africans. I'm not sure we've got any of our South African tribe here today, but 1806, The Dutch forces at the Cape in the Cape Peninsula, Cape Colony, capitulate to the British during a very brief war during the Napoleonic Wars, and the British end up with the Cape Colony for technically till South Africa. South Africa became a dominion in 1910, and so sort of lost a bit of control then. And then certainly South Africa declared a republic and left the Commonwealth in 1960. 18th of January 1936, Rudyard Kipling, probably the poet of the British Empire, died. Interesting man, Kipling, because of course, he's known as sort of the jingoistic imperialist, and yet in many respects he was always worried about Britain. Britain would eventually lose its crown, and he wrote a poem at the end of the 1897 Silver Jubilee for the Queen Victoria. And it's sort of, when captains and kings have departed, and it's all, lest we forget. And it's all about, actually every empire has its final days. And of course, he wrote probably the most popular poem in the English language as well. Sorry, in Britain at any rate, If, which is that sort of great poem that loads of dads and granddads tell their children, not least their grandsons and sons, bit of stoicism, bit of resilience. Of course, actually written for Leander Starr Jameson after the Jameson raid. So that was his jingoistic bit. Probably one of his poems I like best is Our Son Jack, or My Son Jack. Supposedly written about his own son, Jack, who was in the Irish Guards, short-sighted. And of course, in the First World War, Rudyard Kipling was sort of, banging the drum for recruitment. And someone basically said, it's all very well you wanting our sons to go to war. What about your own son? And his son, let's say, short-sighted, didn't pass the medicals, and he pulled a lot of strings to get his son into the army, ends up as commissioned in the Irish Guards, and is killed at the battle, I think it was the Battle of Lewes. And that sort of, that really sort of kicked Kipling and his, many believe that Our Son Jack was a poem that he wrote about him. Supposedly it was actually about Jack Cornwell, the 16-year-old who was awarded the Victoria Cross at the Battle of Jutland. Good story, might tell that at some stage as well. Speaking of First World War, 19th of January 1915, the first Zeppelin raid on a British town. First aerial bombardment of a British town, actually. And 2 people are killed in, of all places, Great Yarmouth. Yeah, that's where the first bombs were dropped and actually killed people, but from the Zeppelin in Britain during the First World War. I'll quickly do the 20th and then we'll come back to the chat, all right? 20th of January, 1265, back in medieval times, Simon de Montfort, who had risen in rebellion with the barons against King Henry III, was effectively de facto ruler of Britain by this time. The king was still alive, but in captivity, and de Montfort calls a parliament. And it's seen as sort of the basis of modern parliaments in Britain. And the reason for that, there'd been parliaments through the Middle Ages made up of barons and bishops, sort of, the powers that be in Britain. And for the first time, Simon de Montfort calls a parliament where he invites commoners, knights from the shires and representatives of the towns or the boroughs to attend parliament as well. And that is the very beginning of the House of Commons as it became. 20th of January, 1649, Henry I, Charles I, is put on trial for his life. Next week in British history, he ends up losing his head. 20th of January, 1853, the Second Anglo-Burmese War ended. Not covered that one, but might do. I've had a few requests for it, actually. And the 20th of January, 1921, a submarine HMS K5 sinks with all hands, a British submarine. So let me just have a quick butchers at what we are all doing here. Because I let the cat out the bag with my Scottish heritage. Oh my God, we've got loads of, how many of you on here? 66 at the minute. That's amazing. Hello from a damp Taunton, says James Beeching. Nothing wrong with Taunton, my birth town there, James. So thank you very much indeed. John Sadler says, you know the entire script of the film Zulu. I don't think you're not alone in that one. I think quite a few of us could do most of the script. I'm getting quite good at Zulu Dawn now as well. Leslie Devo. Leslie, okay, Leslie, I'll throw this one up there, Leslie, only because I've seen it. Someone asked, who was it? Was it, I can't remember if it was David. Someone asked about the, why are we so fascinated by the Anglo-Zulu wars? And Leslie says, it embraces the finer qualities of mutual respect of warriors. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot in that. Yeah, and it was an interesting film because it was definitely done at a time where the Zulus were not portrayed as goodies versus or the British as goodies, the Zulus as baddies. The Zulus were given, and there was a lot of explanation of what the Zulus were about. Very much driven, obviously, by principally Ardendorf and Dr. Otto Witt in the film. But yeah, I don't know, because the Anglo-Zulu Wars, when you look at it, it was basically a 7-8 month period of fighting, and it sort of ends up going to the script eventually. Maybe it's because it didn't go to script initially. Maybe that's one of the reasons people are fascinated by the Zulu Wars, how the Zulus could overturn the British, not just once, but 3 times actually, at different battles. Maybe that was it. But when you compare the longevity and the numbers involved and the numbers killed, when you compare that to, say, the Indian Mutiny, which doesn't have that same fascination, does it? Indian Mutiny, neither does the Boer War, nor do the wars up in Sudan. There's something about the Zulu Wars, I don't know, and other fearsome militaristic African tribes, the Nabile in Zimbabwe, the Ashanti in modern-day Ghana, doesn't seem to have the strike the public imagination. I mean, admittedly, Zulu was a great film. That probably had a lot to do with it. Right, what else have we got? Oh, Lord, loads of stuff. Oh, yeah, Bailey, you wanted to know about AI. We'll come back to that one in a moment. Okay, Bailey. Neil Smith. If Sir Garnet Wolseley had been in command of the Zulu War, how different would the early stages have been, and could a massacre at Isandlwana have been avoided? Maybe. I'm going to come back to it. I'll come back to that one in a moment, if I may, Neil. All right. Thank you, Cara, for sharing your bit. Harry Schreiber, you're half Swedish and Mexican. Hey, is that where you do all your Spanish bits from, Harry? Cool one. Mick of Morden says you used to reenact the film Zulu in the school playground. Jenna, this should just be a Zulu homage today, shouldn't it, really, everyone? Hey, we've got Chandra Boss's birthday anniversary is being celebrated down in India today. Thank you very much for that one. Interesting character again. Very much a love-hate person, I think. Even the lectures. Sorry, I'm just reading a fair few of your comments. Interesting point there about you've just said that too many innocents were killed in the Indian Mutiny or the Indian Revolt or First War of Independence, depending on your point of view. Too many innocents killed in that conflict on both sides to make it popular to remember. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Zulu, it was pretty much, warriors against warriors, wasn't it? So yeah, that could have something to do with it. Good morning, says Easy Gamer. How are you, mate? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. I'm nearly at the bottom of the comments here. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Mr. Angel says maybe the Zulu War is captivating because it was one of the last times old warriors bested new warriors. Perhaps one last blaze of glory. Yeah, because actually thereafter things did tend to go to script, didn't they? Even in places like China during the Boxer Rebellion, where China obviously had the numbers, the Chinese population had the numbers, but they were up against 20th century modern industrial warfare from the British, the Americans, the Germans, the French, Japanese. Ooh, Sarah Jane. Completely different. Let's just okay, fine. Brilliant. Sarah Jane says, my sister has done a lot of history and DNA, family history, Scottish and a lot of Scandinavian, with a name linked to a place in France with Templar connections. Interesting. Fine. Family history is amazing. And a couple of you have got in touch and asked for help. I've given little bits of help where I can on family history. One guy, Chris, got in touch with a photo from his great grandfather in the First World War, and they couldn't work out the what his uniform was. Ends up he was a Fusilier. Got that bit. I could see the flame from the Fusilier badge, but it ends up he was an Irish Fusilier. And we tracked him, got all the story. And Chris comes from London, and he said, can you believe it that my granddad, who came from London, ends up in the Irish Fusiliers in the First World War. My best mate comes from Ireland, and his great-grandfather was in the Irish Fusiliers in the First World War. So isn't that amazing? They might have actually been mates in the First World War, and all these years later, these two guys, their descendants, are good friends in London. I think history is amazing. Just the golden threads of history, fascinating. Righty-ho. What is the genuine question? What is the colonial war that Corporal Jones always goes on about in Dad's army? The Sudan campaign. Jones basically was supposedly in the Wolseley's expedition to try and relieve Gordon, and then he was also in General Kitchener's invasion of Sudan at the end of the 1890s. Corporal Jones, his backstory, and that was fascinating. In Dad's army, they were all given backstories, their characters. So Corporal Jones also served on the Northwest Frontier in India, the Boer War in South Africa, and on the Western Front in the First World War. And his medals basically actually cover that. It wasn't a made-up one. But others have other equally fascinating stories as well. Really, really interesting backstories. Even Captain Mannering, who was too late for the First World War, effectively, and was on the Army of Occupation in the Rhineland after the First World War. And that gave him a lot of grief, especially when Sergeant Wilson turns out to have been an officer in the First World War. Hey, good old, brilliant. One of my two favourite British comedies. Only Fools and Horses is the other one. Righty-ho. Interesting. James Beeching says, Chris, don't forget that the Italians got hammered at Adwa in the 1890s. So even then, supposedly natives, as you call it, could still pull it off. Yeah. And Tony says, English Civil War, fascinating period of history. An Unhappy Civil War is a book that you're recommending there, Tony. Sorry, I'm just making a note of that. Thanks, mate. Hey, they are, Cara. Gordon and Kitchener hold a lot of interest too. Yes, they do. Thank you. Irish PewTuber, good to see you. How are you? Right, let's crack on. 21st of January, 1670, Claude Duval, gentleman highwayman, is executed. He's probably actually the model for the heroic gentleman highwaymen who appear in films, and is sort of the model for what Dick Turpin is created into. Dick Turpin, by the way, was basically a thug from Essex, nasty thug. Claude Duval actually was a bit of a gentleman. He came from France. And in the French, they've always got something, even when they're holding you up and taking your money off you. They do it with sort of a panache that, quite frankly, Dick Turpin didn't have. Anyway, Claude Duval gets his comeuppance. He's captured whilst drunk, actually, in a pub in London off Chandos Street. It's called the Hole in the Wall Tavern, but it's now still there, the pub. It's not called the Hole in the Wall anymore. It's been knocked around a lot over the years. It's actually called the Marquis of Granby. Any of you who are frequent that part of London, not a million miles from Covent Garden. And Claude Duval is hanged on the 21st of January 1670 at Tyburn. 22nd of Jan, 871. Yeah, you did hear that right. 871, 200 years before the Battle of Hastings. The army of Wessex is defeated by the Vikings at the Battle of Basing, just outside Basingstoke in Hampshire. This is on the back of the early part, in the first few weeks of January 871. What was left of the Great Heathen Army had invaded Wessex, actually camped out, had come up the Thames from London, took over Reading, fortified Reading just before New Year, they think, of 870, 871. And then in early January 871, they fought, they and the armies of Wessex fought, let me think, 1, 2, Reading's 2, Ashdown's 3, Basing was 4. They had actually fought 4 battles by the end of January. So, those medieval people, they could certainly have a fight, couldn't they? 22nd of January, 1760, way much later, the Battle of Wandiwash, or Vandavasi in India, Wandiwash. It was a British victory over the French in India. That's one of those things we don't hear about too often. British forces under Colonels Sir Eyre Coote defeat the French. About 204 British casualties against the French, who lost something like 600 to 800, killed, wounded, captured. And that victory at Wandiwash effectively puts pay to French ambitions for some sort of territorial control in India. And in fact, their main port of Pondicherry surrenders a year later. And the Treaty of Paris in 1763 basically reduces France to merely a trading presence in India. So, we talk about Plassey and those sort of battles as the great ones that made the British Empire in India. But equally, you could argue the Battle of Wandiwash actually took out their last main European opponent in India. And it was a significant opponent. The French continued to have a presence in India, kept supporting, and some of their former troops were employed by various Indian rulers for the next 40, 50 years, actually, not least down in Mysore with Tipu Sultan. But there we go. And I've done a video about Mysore. 21st of January, 1828, the Duke of Wellington becomes Prime Minister of Great Britain, or the United Kingdom as it was then. By then, Duke of Westminster actually served twice as Prime Minister. Never a particularly successful politician. He sort of carried a huge amount of weight because he was the victor at Waterloo, but quite reactionary, quite conservative. However, his first ministry, the longest ministry, which is this one that he starts in 21st of January 1828, is probably its big claim to fame was that he managed to steer through the Catholic Emancipation Act, which actually took away the legal bars that had been in place against Catholics ever since the Glorious Revolution in 1688. And interesting, because I say he was quite a conservative character with a capital C as well as a small c, came from an Anglo-Irish family. And yet he was able to persuade King George IV, who was equally as reactionary when it came to the Catholics, to give his royal assent to the Catholic Emancipation Act. There we go. And this brings us 22nd of January to the Zulu Wars. Yay! 22nd of January, 1879. In the main part of the day, in the morning, the British garrison at Isandlwana is overrun by the Zulus. There's loads of stuff on Facebook. I'm a member of Ian Knight's Anglo Zulu War group on Facebook. There's been loads of posts on there, people remembering various anniversaries where they've been there, people like the diehards who are sort of reenactors who dress up in the red coats for Zulu in particular. Some of their posts, great photographs. But Battle of Isandlwana, as I say, British defeated, famously, Lord Chelmsford split his force, took half his force off to the east where he believed the Zulu army was gathering based on, well, as it turned out, faulty intelligence. The Zulus had actually managed to maneuver themselves behind him and they attacked what was left of his camp. He left just slightly less than half his force in the camp at Isandlwana to pack up the wagons, gather all the stuff and follow him along to the battle that was going to happen in the east. Of course, it didn't. And an army of something like 20 to 25,000 Zulus attack the garrison at Isandlwana, which was about 1,500 strong, including Natal native contingent, who weren't armed with rifles. Well, actually, some of them were. I think it was, I can't remember the absolute ratio, but it's like 1 out of every 12 of them were given a rifle, because the white colonists in Natal didn't want lots of armed blacks running around the colony. Wonder why. And so the NNC were Zulus fighting Zulus fundamentally. And so it was left obviously to the main regular British troops and some white colonials who actually had the firepower. So there's been a lot of debate in the Ian Knight group actually as to if should they have formed a lager. Well, that's one of those great stories. Number one, the Boers were able to form lagers because they actually had relatively few wagons. They were always a very small numerical force, the Boers, when they were fighting people like the Zulus. Chelmsford had an army which was 3,000 strong, with the amount of wagons that you had to supply a 3,000 strong army. To have actually created a lager and to have lagered all those wagons together would have taken forever. And, they believed that with a good solid firepower from British regulars, they could hold back any Zulu advance. And don't forget that Chelmsford had cleared off to the east with orders for the camp to pack up and follow him. So with the best will in the world, you can't be lagering your wagons and getting them all ready to follow on at the same time. So lots of myths around Isandlwana, like, the quartermasters would only hand out ammunition to their own regiments, but ends in a complete disaster. I'm sure we can have a lot of chit chat about that rather than me giving you chapter and verse. I've got loads of videos about Isandlwana, the flight from Isandlwana, the attempt to rescue the colours and carry them to safety. And then, of course, that leads into later that afternoon of the 22nd of January, the reserve part of the Zulu army, who basically hadn't been in on the glory at the Battle of Isandlwana. They basically went off. They crossed the river, the Buffalo River, which is the border to British Natal. Tried to did raid some farms on that side of the river, really, because they, quite frankly, they wanted something to show for their efforts. And then they came across the mission station at Rorke's Drift, which was being used as both the hospital and as an army supply depot. And the famous Battle of Rorke's Drift takes place at about something like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It starts on the 22nd of January, runs right through the night, famously with the hospital being set on fire by the Zulus. And, there's a battle during the night illuminated by the fire from the hospital. Ironically, a couple of things there. The film Zulu, obviously this was what it's all about. Rorke's Drift starts off at Isandlwana right at the beginning with the dead soldiers and the Zulu who picks up a rifle, doesn't he? Remember, and he stands there like that with his shield and his rifle, and he looks up and the Zulu army's on the skyline cheering. Probably didn't happen. But the battle itself, Rorke's Drift, is immortalised in Zulu. Lots of things wrong with the film. Historically, we all have a laugh at Hollywood. This was a British-made film. Shot in South Africa during apartheid, so it actually had to get across quite a lot of political hurdles in South Africa at the time. But it was a British film. Cy Enfield was and Stanley Baker were in charge of it, and it's interesting. One of those ones where people say it's an imperialistic, glorious film, and interesting, of course. Produced by Cy Enfield, who had been blacklisted as a communist supporter during the McCarthy era in Hollywood, and Stanley Baker, who was a lifelong card-carrying member of the Labour Party. So there you go. Lots of holes in the film, and not least, of course, famously, Henry Hook was not a drunkard and barrack room lawyer. That's just one of the holes in the film. So anyway, let's just see where we're going here. Oh, hang on. I'm just going to go back to some of this stuff here. Charlie Manson's just reinforcing my comment about the French having a strong presence in India. Yeah. We've still got some stuff going on about family history. Great stuff, family history. It's good if you can find something interesting in it. Anyway, the Greens don't do very much, I have to be honest. Love this channel, says Painting Panzers. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. I try my best. Probably don't please everyone, I think some people don't like the way I massacre the French language, or indeed the English language for that matter. But I like telling stories. I don't pretend I'm an English grammar expert. John Sadler says, did Wellington serve as Prime Minister under his title or under his name? Under his title, the Duke of Wellington. At that time, lords certainly were, principally, most of the prime ministers were lords of one form or other. Battle of Millstone, 20th of January 1777. American militia and Pennsylvania riflemen overrun a British supply depot in northern New Jersey. 3 days later, a British force is ambushed at Woodbridge, losing 19. And that's why we don't study the American Revolutionary Wars at school in Britain. James Beeching, your family claim is to fame. One of them is your great uncle was a bodyguard to Queen Mary of Teck. He always said she was absolutely terrifying and didn't need any protecting. Good Lord, we've got loads of stuff here. Let me just see, because I'm just going to read some of your questions out, because it's a lot more interesting than reading out events that happen in British history. James Beating, at Isandlwana, they should have formed a square. They probably should. Don't forget, squares very often at that time, James, were principally, and they were starting to become obsolete, had been used primarily as defensive mechanisms against cavalry charges, which of course wasn't taking place at Isandlwana. They would also have had to find the right place to form a square, because don't forget, they were most of the British redcoats were actually out on the perimeter, and the only time they could have actually come together and formed a square would have been to retreat into the camp. And you'd have had to have retreated into the camp from that perimeter with the Zulus now hot on your heels. I'm not saying you're wrong. I follow this debate in, as I say, Ian Knight's Anglo-Zulu War group on Facebook. There's some very learned people, not least Ian Knight himself's in there, but some other really good people in there. And there's a lot of debate about what could have happened at Isandlwana, but there's certainly a very strong school of thought was they didn't have the time to form a square. You only form a square really when you realise your numbers up, and by then at Isandlwana, the ground they had to cover too much ground to come together. That's what I've heard. Okay. Yeah, Charlie. Oh, it's all right, Charlie. You've just sort of mentioned what I was sort of saying there. Yeah, they were left with far too big an area. But don't forget, they were left with a huge area to defend because they were never supposed to defend it. You know, Chelmsford was absolutely believing that the Zulu army was to the east, in the direction of the capital where they were coming from. The night before, his scouts had basically come up, or mounted group had come up against huge numbers of Zulus in that direction. He believed, wrongly, that that was the vanguard of the Zulu army. And so, yeah, with hindsight being a wonderful thing, isn't it? And I think maybe that's one of the things people are fascinated with these Anglo-Zulu wars, because the amount of what-ifs. Not so much at Rorke's Drift, but certainly at Isandlwana. You know, why did Chelmsford divide his force? Should he have divided his force? Could the force have formed a square, lagered their wagons, and held off? Arguably, you could. You know, it's if you take out the Natal native contingent who are armed with assegais and Zulu shields. Okay, the only thing that separated them from the Zulu warriors, they wore a red headband. Okay, so you are relying on your Europeans with rifles. So you're talking of probably less than 1,000 men. So even if they had compacted, there were 1,000 against 20,000. And part of the problem you had was that the Zulu army, the main Zulu army, as they were seeing it, were lined up in front of them. But one of the horns, the wings, the flanks, had gone round the back of the Isandlwana mountain. And the first thing they knew about that mob was when they charged over the hill into the undefended camp. So, I could do quite a lot on the Zulu wars, actually, because I find it fascinating. And, yeah, like a lot of people, I think there was something about the Zulus, and let's be honest, you know, the Zulus were a militaristic nation. That's probably actually how they could overrun the British at Isandlwana. There are people that come on my YouTube channel who sort of make them out to be like, you know, recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize or something. Most of the Zulus' neighbours, African neighbours in southern Africa at the time, would not have thought that that they were a peace-loving nation. That's for sure. Mr. Angel 84 says you've always been puzzled by the choice of terrain. Seems a kind of a bad spot. Sort of was. Lots of there were streams nearby for water. That was one of the reasons they picked it. Reasonably open area for all those wagons and tents to be placed as well. It was never seen as a defendable position per se. The idea, don't forget, Lord Chelmsford, his biggest problem in the Anglo-Zulu Wars, based on his experience of fighting the Xhosa people in Eastern Cape, was that the causes never weren't daft enough to ever come out in open battle against British redcoats. So they relied on guerrilla tactics, which ultimately didn't work for them. And Chelmsford was really driven by the fact that the Zulus would do the same thing, that they wouldn't actually fight in battle. His biggest concern was the Zulus wouldn't actually have a battle with him, and he would be ground down, chasing ghosts around Zululand. And of course, don't forget, politically, he was on very thin ice. Benjamin Disraeli, Prime Minister of Britain at the time, had specifically told Sir Bartle Frere, the political head in South Africa, the British High Commissioner, and Chelmsford, commander of the British Army in South Africa, not to invade Zululand. Frere and Chelmsford, for a variety of reasons, decided they would invade Zululand. They'd have to do it on the quiet, and you need, obviously, what they were going to present, Benjamin Disraeli and Queen Victoria, was a fait accompli. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I know we shouldn't have invaded, but we did, and we got away with it. So Chelmsford was, not only was he aware that the Khoisas had not given battle, he was really worried that that was actually, that's sort of what Zulus would probably do. It seemed to be how Africans fought the British. And he definitely did not want that, because word was going to get back to Benjamin Disraeli. There's a British army in Zululand faffing about chasing guerrilla fighters, and it shouldn't even be in there. So he was desperate for a battle. So when he heard that there was a potential Zulu army out to the east, you can sort of start to see how his rationale worked, rather than just being vainglorious. Some people have said, was he like Custer? I haven't studied Custer a lot, have studied a fair bit of Chelmsford, and not least John the Band's fantastic book on Chelmsford. And I would say that Chelmsford was definitely not vainglorious in the way that George Custer was. Made some crap decisions, but then they're only crap decisions with hindsight. Rather like, do you remember those of you in Britain, Gerald Ratner, describing Ratner's jewellery stuff that they sold for cheap as chips prices as crap? Well, do you remember Gerald Ratner? And of course, his company tanked. It went in the press, share price fell through the floor, customers saying you're taking the mickey out of us. Gerald Ratner had delivered that speech at after dinner as an after dinner speaker several times before, to huge hilarity. It just happened that he then made it on effectively a slow news day, and the press got hold of it and ran with it, and there was nothing better for the press to really get into that day. With hindsight, what a stupid thing for Gerald Ratner to say. His track record was, when you say it, it gets a hell of a laugh. They really love me at the after dinner speeches. So, yeah, we're all wise after the event. We're all wise in our own lives after the event as well, aren't we? 1967 MLP just asked a different question slightly. You see a lot of stuff on YouTube portraying Montgomery in not such a good light. What's your take on Montgomery? Open that to everyone here, okay? Not just me. My view on Montgomery, well, he won. He did the job that he was asked to do. I think he had a bit of an ego problem, Montgomery, but then let's be honest, so did General Patton. If anyone needed any sort of special medals in World War II, I think it's probably Dwight Eisenhower for dealing with Montgomery, Patton, Churchill, de Gaulle. And he had to deal with the presidents back in the USA as well. That's just a few people I can think of. So I'll be interested in what other people think of Montgomery. Jury out in my mind. I don't think he was as good as Bill Slim in the Far East. Montgomery was very much driven by his First World War experiences, where he learned from the First World War that you attacked in strength, and he wouldn't move unless he had that strength. Not a bad learning, really, is it, in a military capacity? Was he gung-ho like Patton? No. And that would always be one. But when he tried to be gung-ho like at Arnhem, it all went horribly wrong, didn't it? So, yeah, a bit of a plodder. Biggest problem was probably as a negative was his ego for me. Right. Someone just said there was a good video on YouTube about Montgomery. Thank you. Hey, Redcoat History. Chris Parkinson, nice to have you here, mate. It's really good to see you. Chris has a fantastic channel, Redcoat Military History, here on YouTube. Tends to actually talk about a lot of the stuff I talk about. Hasn't done too much here. He hasn't gone back into Anglo-Saxon times like I have in the past, and it's not doing. I know he has got something coming up about the Duke of Marlborough, but he hasn't done all the sort of War of Jenkins ear and things. But he doesn't tend to do too much Second World War. 19th century, absolutely brilliant, and Napoleonic Wars. So, Chris, really good to see you. Chris, you can probably join in here with some of the stuff people are asking about the Anglo-Zulu Wars, because you've done some great videos about the Anglo-Zulu Wars, and of course you live in South Africa. You've walked a lot of the Zulu War battlefields as well. In fact, we have talked. In fact, we talked earlier this week, didn't we, about potentially doing some sort of collaboration, which would be quite cool. Maybe even just a live call like this would be good, wouldn't it? And you could always throw in your questions in. Someone said, what was the final outcome of the Zulu War? Did the Zulus win or lose? Yes, they lost. Is the very small answer. The defeat at Isandlwana, the British had to basically leave Zululand with the tails between their legs. Chelmsford got his half of the army, or his half of the column out. Was delighted to find that Rorke's was still being held. But then, of course, now, apart from the actual vitriol he got for losing over 1,000 troops at Isandlwana, the British now wanted revenge, and the British politically needed to somehow wipe the slate clean from Isandlwana. So he got all the reinforcements to reinvade Zululand that he hadn't been given prior to his initial invasion. Funny how events turn, isn't it? Politics. And then really then the second invasion of Zululand went the way the script of the first should have gone, ultimately with the Zulus being defeated at the Battle of Ulundi, and King Cetshwayo was captured and famously brought to London, where he was the talk of the town. Young ladies were all queuing up to see this burly Zulu king, now dressed in European clothes. And he had an audience with Queen Victoria. Lucky Cetshwayo, hey? Vince Lander has just said something about the best three generals, Marlborough, Wellington, and Slim. I would agree with all three of them, and definitely Montgomery is not in that top three for me. But there you go. Oh, thank you. Oh, and here you've just seen it here, folks. All right, Chris Parkinson, Redcoat Military, Redcoat History. It's saying thanks for the shout out, loving this, and yes, it'd be good to collaborate sometime. You heard it from him. We've got it in writing, folks. All right. Great thing about Slim, Painting Panzers says, it was that he actually learnt from his mistakes and was willing to change things up. I've had some criticism, by the way, and I was chatting to Chris Parkinson about this week, actually, which is I get people who say to me, you know, you talk about Isandlwana and you talk about the Battle of Maiwand in Afghanistan, and I was actually accused of being a traitor because I have this picture, of course, one of my pictures that I have in the room. I swap them around because, you know, I get bored. But, you know, that's the famous painting of Isandlwana, painted, of course, by Victorian. And it was, I was a traitor for having that picture up, a British defeat. And someone else said, you know, sick and tired of hearing about British defeats. For me, it's how you learn from your defeats. And you see that picture, by the way, which is not some woke picture, you know, painted by some 18-year-old with a pierced nose at university at the minute. This was by Fripp. He was one of the great Victorian painters. And to me, you know, so number one, actually, the Victorians at the height of the British Empire were willing to talk about their defeats. Didn't necessarily like them, but were willing to talk about them. But for me, you know, what I've actually got there is a group of British soldiers who know the game is up and they are still hanging there together. And that's what, for me, what you know, professional soldiers do, even when it ain't going to come out right. And there's no way these guys are getting out of here. They stay together. And to me, that's, you know, that is part of being British, actually, if I'm really honest. Yeah, keeping together when the chips are down. So there we are. And I think you learn from your mistakes, just like someone was just saying there about Bill Slim. You know, it's only from your mistakes that your resilience grows, and indeed you learn so that you're better next time. Let's just quickly go down there. Redcoat, you're saying, as a proud Brit, I think it's part of our national psyche to embrace and celebrate our defeats as much as our victories. We do have that. You know, and it's interesting, isn't it? Like that one there, you know, Isandlwana. You shouldn't have that on your wall. You shouldn't talk about Isandlwana or the Battle of Maiwand but we talk about Dunkirk. We talk about the charge of the Light Brigade, which admittedly we did get to the guns. Unfortunately, right behind the guns were mass ranks of Cossacks. And for those people who say we got to the guns, we then actually had to hightail it back up the valley, being pounded. And, you know, Tennyson says it in his poem, you know, back they went, cannons to the left of them, cannons to the right of them. You know, they had to relive the whole charge in reverse. So yeah, we do quite enjoy that whole thing, don't we? Got a lot of stuff about John Sadler. How did the artist get them all to stand still like that? Do you know, it's one of my favourite paintings as well. I'll just tell you why. I haven't got it all on here. But all our eyes are focused, and I might do a video about this because the actual painting's in the National Army Museum, Chelsea in London. Really good work. But you focus on this, and there's a lot of animation going on in here. You know, this guy there, he's trying to give the last bullet to someone up here. Got the little drummer boy, you know, with the old surly, you know, the sergeant. Right, there's the sergeant. Sorry, with the bandaged head. This old soak here. He's looking after the drummer boy. But then actually, if you look over here, you know, you've still got this mounted man trying to get out of the camp. And over here, whoops, can you see that? We've got two soldiers back to back fighting. Just off the picture here, but there's a man on a wagon, again, swinging the butt of his rifle, trying to hold off the Zulus. I find all of that stuff amazing, but there we go. Painting panzers. Funny how us Brits celebrate military disasters more than our biggest wins. Yeah, it is. It's something in it. I don't know what it is. We like being top dog, but we don't. Bizarre. Neil Smith says, was the 24th Regiment of Isandlwana fame the only British regiment to be awarded the Silver Wreath by Queen Victoria? Don't know. I think so. Redcoat, I don't know if you got any better knowledge than that. Clarkson 42. I totally agree with your comment there. I'm just going to read it out. I believe there's a romantic element in a doomed military manoeuvre. I believe it speaks to the heights of bravery of the men who fight and die despite all odds. Yeah, and I think that happened there. And the story at Isandlwana of the various last stands and young husbands futile charge down the was it young husband Redcoat, or was it Austin? Was it Austin? I can't remember. But you know, man wearing a monocle leads his men with his sword drawn down the hill when they've run out of ammunition at the Zulus. Couldn't get out the camp, so they just charge. Yeah, I mean that's you know, we make films of that sort of stuff, and I'll be honest, you know, let's face it, a film showing the British gunning down hundreds of Zulus with a Maxim machine gun is not exactly exciting, is it? Maybe that's partly why the Zulu War holds that thing in the imagination in a way that, say, the Battle of Omdurman in Sudan doesn't. Much bigger battle as well, by the way, with the numbers. There we go. Where are we at? 1:53, and we've got nowhere so far in this week of history. So let me just tie up a bit more with you. It was young husband who led the final charge, but Lieutenant Anstey led the last survivors. That's right. He was going effectively behind, well, not behind the mountain, but trying to track. And all right, Lieutenant Anstey was the only officer not buried at Isandlwana. His family brought his body back to England, I think. And also, of course, he was actually born in Australia. So technically, the Aussies can claim him as one of theirs. Neil Morrison, Bilson's fan club there. We all know who your favourite general is. Neil says it's amazing how famous paintings like The Thin Red Line and Scotland Forever by, of course, Lady Elizabeth Thompson, Lady Elizabeth Butler at Waterloo, don't show what actually happened, have loads of artistic license. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You know how we all go on about, you know, films, including Zulu, you know, loads of artistic license. Well, it's amazing how artists painted it that way as well, back in the day where we didn't have moving pictures. Yeah, and to a certain extent, they give the people what they want to see. Of course, you know, it was a sort of bit self-fulfilling. If you know that the British public like one thing or the other, that's what you show. Hence why lots of them, it's very heroic and lots of chivalry in there as well. Not in that painting, but a lot of chivalry, certainly dealing with the French, you know, honourable surrenders, swords and things, you know. because that's what it was all about. Right. Thank you very much, Redcoat. You just confirmed that Lieutenant Anstey's body was taken back. John Sadler, only Americans celebrate victories. And I think you're taking the mickey there, mate, and that's okay. I've got plenty of time for Americans, not necessarily all of them at this minute in time, but there you go. Russians too close in the thin red line. Yeah, absolutely, Neil. The Russians were never as close as the painting suggests, because they're almost toppling over in front of the thin red line. It wasn't quite like that at all, was it? Cara, oh god, hang on, we've got a couple of things to the history chap here. QA Library, you've got 3 books on the shelf about the troops that took part in the Napoleonic Wars. One of them talk about. Oh, okay, thank you. And Cara, thank you. Nice one, Leslie. Thank you very much. We're almost there, I think, at the bottom of the. Oh, yeah, we're almost there. Any chance that me and Redcoat could cover the disasters? Oh, not a disaster, please. At the Sitang Bridge in Burma, 1942. Well, that'll be a learning for both me and you, Chris, won't it? I think. I'm not sure, but it's certainly not my area. Not that particular action is not my area of expertise. Hey, great. Thank you very much indeed, Chris, for joining us. Hope to see you. Well, when you do a live, tell me about it, and I will shout about it. Oh, by the way, got to just shout out. Not for you, Chris, because you're in South Africa, so you're not probably interested in this. But I will just quickly shout out that there's an event coming up on the Saturday, the 28th of March, at the Royal Welsh Regiments Museum at Brecon in South Wales. It's called A King's Legacy, 1879 Remembered. It's all about the Zulu Wars. Okay, fun day, fun family community day. It's being looked at and just on their website now. Sort of remembering. Our compere for the day is going to be Glyn Baker, actor and film producer and son of the late Stanley Baker, who plays Lieutenant Chard in Zulu, and of course who helped direct the film. There is dancing from a South African dance on, the Die Hard, so I mentioned earlier. Living History Group are presenting 24th Foot military demonstrations. There's also the Marquess of Winchester's Regiment of Foot there. A male voice choir, we're in South Wales after all. Talk by historian John Young. There's war games, there's lectures, there's children's model painting. Meet the regimental goat. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to just quickly take that and I will place it in the chat. Okay, there we go. That's the event. If you need to, if you're interested in it, Saturday the 28th of March. Might try and get down there, although I'm actually flying out on holiday the following day from Heathrow. So it's going to be a bit hairy as to whether I can do South Wales and Heathrow in a 24-hour period. I know it's physically possible. Mentally, I don't know if I can be bothered. Righty-ho. My mic is bouncing off the walls. Oh, that's a shame. Let me just move it slightly. Any better for you? Says for DJ Deep 4. Thank you very much indeed. Right, let me finish off with the last few events in British history this week. Okay, so just on the 22nd, which as you know, has been sort of a homage to the Zulu Wars today. But 22nd of January 1944, the Anzio landings in Italy. Operation Shingle, meant to outflank the Germans who were defending the Italian peninsula very successfully. Anzio, just not far from Rome, and only 17, completely caught the Germans on the hop. 17 Allied troops are lost in the landing. That was it. By the end of the day, 36,000 Allied troops had landed on the beach at Anzio, just as I say, not far from Rome, and 3,500 vehicles had been landed as well. In fact, an American reconnaissance jeep even travelled into the outskirts of Rome. There were no Germans about. General Lucas, however, decided to, the Allied commander, US General Lucas, decides to dig in, and eventually the Germans do turn up, and they stuck at Anzio for the next 2 months. 2 months where the Allies lost 7,000 men killed and about 36,000 wounded at Anzio. And strangely enough, my granddad, Ernie Harris, was in the British contingent at Anzio, principally American landings, but as I say, British were there. And my granddad was mentioned in dispatches twice, actually. He was a lorry driver, and I know certainly one of them is taking stuff up under fire to the front line. So yeah, don't know too much about why he got his. Unfortunately, we tried to find his details, and there was a fire in some of the records, and some of the records are lost. British government fire, nothing to do with my family. But anyway, 1963, the 22nd of January, 1963. I thought we were going to get away from Zulus, but not quite. Okay. Same day as the Battle of Isandlwana and the Battle of Rorke's Drift starts, 22nd of January, 1964, the premiere of Zulu, the film. And this is the program from it. Nice little one that I got. In fact, I actually purchased it off Ian Knight, he of Zulu historian fame. Yeah, that's one of the prides in my collection, that one. And interesting read. Maybe I'll do a little short or something about that some stage. We talked about that. 23rd of January 1879, Rorke's Drift is relieved. 23rd of January 1909, the Tottenham outrage. Nothing to do with Tottenham's rubbish performance at the moment in the Premiership. This is actually an anarchist heist in Tottenham, North London, where two anarchists robbed a payroll that was going to a local factory and were now chased by the police for over 5 miles through London and the borders of the countryside, as it was then, with Chingford and Walthamstow, before finally being cornered and killed. They killed 2 people in the process, a policeman who tried to apprehend them and a young boy, 10-year-old, who was just doing some odd jobs in the street and was killed in the crossfire. 24th of January, 1502. Neil, this is one for you. The Treaty of Perpetual Peace is signed between James V of Scotland and Henry VIII of England. Peace, they were brothers-in-law. Henry's sister, elder sister, had married James V of Scotland, but it wasn't going to end in with perpetual peace. Well, it didn't last very long, because within not too many years, Scotland were invading England as part of the old alliance with France. England were having a war with France. The French called in their Scottish allies to take a bit of that pressure off. The Scots invade while Henry's in France, and the Scots are actually defeated at the Battle of Flodden Field. There are loads of these battles, aren't there, which we just don't cover they don't get really covered in a lot of YouTube. Don't get covered at school, that's for sure. Speaking of battles you might have heard of, 24th of January, 1900, the Battle of Speenkop in South Africa during the Anglo-Boer War. Another disaster for the Brits, which I suppose I shouldn't talk about, should I? Because obviously that's traitorous to talk about defeats. We should only talk about Mafeking and capturing Pretoria. And obviously we don't talk about concentration camps either. Battle of Speenkop is remembered not least by because it was a steep sloped mountain, when they built some terraces at various football grounds around England in the Edwardian period. They were known as the Kop. Not least we have one at Hillsborough, but also most famously the one at Anfield at Liverpool. So those steep gradients. Interesting, and of course that was nicknamed, or gained its nickname as well, poignancy, because the Lancashire Brigade were fought at Speenkop. 24th of January 1914, the Battle of Dogger Bank, North Sea Royal Navy versus the Imperial German Navy in the opening months. 24th of January 1950, the Battle of Dogger Bank. And 24th of January 1915, the Battle of Jarab in what's now Saudi Arabia. But you haven't heard of this one. Maybe I'll tell this. I said I was going to tell some more stories about the Middle East conflict of the First World War. This is one. Everyone is focused on Lawrence of Arabia leading the Arab revolt on effectively the western side of modern-day Saudi Arabia, sort of Mecca, Medina, and then going up the coast towards modern-day Jordan. What I don't realise is there was effectively a rival British faction, very much supported by the British India Office, who actually were far more interested in Iraq than they were in Jordan, Palestine, Syria area. And they actually were keen not to support the Hashemites in modern Saudi Arabia, but the Saud family in eastern Saudi Arabia, the central part of Saudi Arabia to the east. And this was a battle where between Ottoman supporting Arabs and the Sauds. And the Sauds had a British military advisor with them, a man. I did the video yesterday about Blackadder, all right? Bit of a push. You know, there's Edmund Blackadder, Rowan Atkinson's character, John Blackadder, soldier for Duke of Marlborough. This one's even better. At the Battle of Jarrab, the only major casualty from the British side was Captain William Shakespeare. Yep, nothing to do or no direct descent from the Bard of Stratford, but a really interesting moment. And he and Gertrude Bell were two of the real Arabists who were great supporters of the Saud family. And it's very interesting to think if the British had maybe put their eggs in the Saud basket rather than with the Hashemites, how Arabia and British influence in Arabia and everything else could have turned out. I'm not saying necessarily for the better, it just would have been different to what we've got now. And two last ones for you. 24th of January 1945, Operation Meridian 1. This was, it's British Pacific Fleet launched 105 aircraft from from 4 British aircraft carriers. God, we had 4 just for one action once. HMS Indomitable, HMS Illustrious, HMS Victorious, and HMS Indefatigable. They launched them against the Japanese-held island of Sumatra in what's now Indonesia, and their purpose was to attack the oil refineries, which were being used by the Japanese war effort. And they lost 32 of the planes that took off and never came back. But combined with a further operation, Meridian 2, at the end of January, the raids actually had severely damaged oil production on Sumatra, reduced oil output by about a third in the final months of the Japanese, for the Japanese in the final months of their war against the Allies. And last but not least, 24th of January 1965, Winston Churchill died. So there we are, folks. That is a battle, a trip and a half through history this week. Leslie, it says I'm just quickly whizzing back here because some of you have taken the time to write stuff. Oh, Leslie, your old landlady, had a brother who was killed at Anzio. Yeah. Clarkson 42 questions why the Allies even bothered with Italy. And I noticed, excuse me, someone made a comment in response. James Beeching, you just said Italy was politically weak, so fighting them knocked at least one of the Axis powers out of the war, which is true. What did happen, of course, was the Germans then took over Italy rather than allowing Italy to collapse or go neutral, or indeed to go over to the Allied side, which I guess from a German perspective would have been the worst of the lot, wouldn't it? It suddenly allowed Allied troops to be from basically landing in southern Italy. Within weeks, they could have been on the Austrian border. So I guess strategically, the Germans needed to prop up Italy, and the only way they're going to prop it up is to basically send their own men in there. Cara, was that you? It's got to be you who's made that comment. I've just lost it here. Someone said Thomas Hardy. We've got some comments about Thomas Hardy. Never one of my dad's favourite authors. He used to love the way he painted the pictures of old Wessex from really the early half of the 19th century, even though he was writing at the back end of the 19th century. Not one I ever really got into, though. Having a famous name helped a British lad captured by the Germans, as they feared his surname Churchill meant he was related to Winston Churchill. Yes, that's absolutely right. Was it Jack Churchill? I can't remember. And was there a Churchill at one of the Stalags for the Great Escape? And there was someone else. There was a Nelson, and the Germans wouldn't execute him. That's definitely from the Great Escape, because they thought he was related to Admiral Nelson, which he wasn't. But there we are. Sarah Jane says she escaped Dickens but suffered Thomas Hardy instead. Yeah, Dickens is another one. He writes some good stuff, but yeah, and very interesting for those of you who read Oliver Twist. I wouldn't say he's anti-Semitic, but I don't normally describe Fagin as the Jew in every other line, but he did. Kesselring was a great defensive commander. I'm preferring that conversation where I'm on happier ground there. Okay, thank you very much indeed. John Sadler making a comment there about the Royal Navy carriers. Someone had father and uncle were missing in Normandy, but both survived. Whoa. Have a great weekend, says Leslie. I think that's more videos on Cawnpore, British era. Oh, wow. Could do some. I have to say, I've got so much planned for this year. I'm really looking forward to it. Very excited. So, folks, that's the end of this week. I just want to thank you all for joining me today. And thank you all of you for watching my videos, commenting on my videos, liking my videos, all good for YouTube. Thank you very much. And of course, thanks in particular to those of you who are members and put your hand in your pocket, become members of my channel, or give me one-off donations as well. I really appreciate that. That sort of means you're not beholden to all those YouTube blinking adverts and things as well, and allows me to do more of this sort of stuff rather than just being out there trying to earn the money with videos. So thank you very much indeed for all of you. I'm off this weekend. I'm watching the rugby at Worcester at home to Hartbury tomorrow, so looking forward to that. Hopefully we can get back to a bit of a winning run and move up the table from third. Let's overhaul Bedford in second place, and then in theory try and catch up Ealing Trailfinders. Possibly an impossible task now at this stage of the season. Anyway, folks, thanks very much. Have a great weekend, and see you very soon. Bye.